I'm going to give a presentation on the backup fall simulator. So it's backup fall, something I made. And yeah, let's go into it. So backup fall in Highline, you know, it's like when the main line breaks. And we had the backup fall simulator already by Panos. So it's available on this website, and you can see what it looks like. So it asks for a few parameters, which are the weight of the slackliner, the length of the gap, and the length of the backup probably, or the extra. Yeah, this row is the extra percentage of backup. The sag where you begin with, the length of the leash, I think. I'm not sure. And the stretch of the backup line, and then it just calculates from that how far you would fall, and also a few more things like the forces on the leash and the forces in the line, and the time of the fall as well. So all these informations, they're good, they're useful to know, but this model is from 2018, you can see, and it only allowed to compute the backup fall happening in the middle of the webbing and with no split connection between the main and the backup line. In the past, I don't know, 3 years, I don't think I've been on a single highline with no connection between main and backup. So it's not really relevant anymore to have this. It's still good information, but I thought I could do something a bit better. So let me show you what I've done. So the whole project is available on my GitHub. If you see here, so you have everything open source, and you can run the project clicking here. I've already opened it, so it's this. All right, so let's dig into this. Well, a bit of a warning here saying this is a simulation. It's not going to make sure you rig correctly. And then we can start specifying all our gear. So here, by default, there is 3 different types of webbing. There is the nylon, polyester, and high-tech, with like about average characteristics for these webbings. But if you have your own webbing and you want to define it, you can like the webbing, and let's say it's actually 145 grams per meter, and it has not too much stretch, 2% at 5 kilonewton. So here, this is because some manufacturers give the stretch at 5 kilonewton, some give it at 8 kilonewton or at 10. So you can still enter the percentage and at which tension it is done. And so this webbing you can now save, and whenever you come back to this page, it will reload and you will have your webbings saved. Now you can do the same thing with setups. You can, so here I have this setup that's saved in memory, and when I select it, it creates it. But let's see how to create a setup. So I will start with the first segment. I will say what the first segment is, what the length of the first segment. Then I will do the same thing for the backup and the length of the backup. Then I can, if I have several segments that are the same, I can just duplicate it many times. And maybe the last one, I will just say it's actually nylon. Why not? And backup still polyester. This is an example. So you have a setup of 200 meter with polyester, 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 and nylon. And you can save that setup by giving it a name. New setup. This is convenient if you have your setups and you want, like, sometimes you want to see if this setup will be good on one spot or if it's better, or which of your setups is better in one spot. You can just load the setups you have saved. So we're going to look at this one now for the next demonstration. So it's a freestyle setup with a trick zone, let's say, which is 8 meters in the middle. Then you have on both sides, you have 30 meters of nylon on one side, and the other side you have 50 meters, and the backup is longer and the main line, obviously. And I will say I want to rig this setup on a 70-meter gap, good length for freestyle, and I want to rig it at 30-meter high. So it's the same height on both sides. If you have a different height of anchors, you can also include that in the model. And now I want to rig it at a tension of 2.2 kilonewton. And then I say which side I want to adjust from. So here there was 30 meter on one side and the other side I had 50 meter. This is the side I'm going to pull the main line from. So adjust from right side. And it tells me I will have to put 20.45 meters to get to this tension. Yeah, because it was the whole setup was 88 meters. So if you pull 20 meters, you have 68 meters, which on 70-meter gap is pretty good. Let's say the slackliner is not exactly in the middle. So here you specify where the slackliner is, how much the slackliner weighs, the height of the slackliner, because that's taken into account from where you fall from, the length of the leash, and you can also specify the amplitude of the bounce, which can be relevant. Okay, now if I just click Run Model, it just does this because I haven't specified which section is going to break. So here we have like the height of the person at the top of the bounce, and then when they leash fall, they go this low. So 30 meter, you're at 26, 25 and something meters, it's written here. And leash fall, you fall down to this. So you're still way off the ground. But what happens if you have a backup fall? So we choose which section of mainline we break. So let's say I'm breaking the first one. And then I click Run Model. And now the backup fall at the lowest point is at 13.65 meters. So it's still safe. You also can read all the tension. So the tension in the left side and the right side is not necessarily the same because the setup is not symmetrical, because you're not in the middle. The tension in the leash as well. So here 5.31 kilonewton in the leash is quite a high tension to take on your body, quite a high impact. Obviously, these numbers have to, like, this is a modelization, so it doesn't take into account several factors like friction, like how much like the body is actually not really a solid object. It absorbs a bit of the impact. So those factors are not taken into account, but also other factors are not taken into account, which might make these numbers higher or lower. We still have to do several tests to see how accurate this simulator is. And then you have a bit of explanation on what the numbers mean here below. Okay, so I think this concludes the demonstration. Just a reminder, enter your webbings, create your setup, choose your spot, specify your slackliner, and then you have the results. Sometimes the simulator doesn't work. Yeah, there is still some bugs. Like when it creates results, the results are correct compared to, well, they solve the math, but sometimes it just doesn't finish running, and there are still some bugs I have to correct. But most of the times it will still give you good results. Okay, back to the presentation. When do we want to use the simulator like this? Well, one example is when you want to buy gear, you want to know how long you want to have your backup for some length of webbing. It can be an indication. It's still better to test it, to ask, like the manufacturers, usually they know how much extra backup you want for one piece of webbing, or people who already have this kind of setups. If you want to check when you're going to rig a line and you want to make sure it's not too low, you can use this to check. You can run the model several times, like wondering which part of the main line would break. We did this simulation for the Ribeauvillé speed line workup before we decided on which setup we would use, because it was mostly Dyneema, so kind of worrying about 150 meter line. Another part is when you want to make a case and you want to like you have to add this to your folder to send to the authorities, and then you get the authorization from that. And also, like, just to have fun, you can just go into there, and Tom likes to do this a lot. Go and enter all the rigs you've done in the past, and you were wondering, is it safe? Is it not safe? And then you realize it was not safe, but you survived. So yeah, I guess you can understand why it could be useful. All right, so is the model perfect? Start by saying no, but there are some good things. First thing is that I compared with the model from Slackbro. So in the case where the Slackliner is in the middle and it's not connected main in backup, and I found out that we have exactly the same results. So like we use the same math basically. So what we're looking at here is one example of comparison I did. The varying parameter is the stretch of the backup, so between 0.5% of stretch to 18% of stretch, and you have the different results values. So the lowest point of the leash of the backup pole, the forces in the anchor, the forces in the leash. You can see that like there is actually two curves, the blue and the orange one, and they're super close, and the max error is of the order of 0.1%. So this is like approximation errors. It's not like the mathematical model is the same. Now we still have to conduct real tests and to compare with the tests that I've already made probably. So selectivity, balanced community, how not to highline, and trickline collective. That's the ones I found just this morning by looking quickly. But there have been already some people who made backup falls, and they took more or less accurate measurements. So I have to go into this and see how much information I can take from what they put out there, and ask them also more, and then see if it is enough for me to run the model or not. And most likely, like a good test would be to really go in a spot and do a lot of backup falls with varying the parameters, seeing with something where I really can control the way to measure all everything, because getting the data from somebody who made the test a few years ago and they probably didn't think of measuring what I'm interested in to run my model, it's limited. Okay, so the simulator is actually wrong for several reasons. So first thing is here we have the stretch curve that the simulator uses. So the simulator is only at the moment thinking the webbing has a linear stretch curve, and actual stretch curves look more like this. And they're like you know, like the stretch at some kilonewton doesn't tell you the whole behavior of the webbing, and for freestyle this is quite important, for example, and for highlining in general, yeah, like for the falls, it's not enough to have just this. It's even worse than this, because here is some experiments that were made also by Panos, so from Slagbro. He published a very nice article on this. It's what happens when you put impact in the webbing. So in gray, here is the stretch curve he measured for some piece of webbing, so it's nylon in this case. So if you do a slow pull test, this is what he measured. The dashed line is what a manufacturer gave, but he measured something a bit different. And then in blue, so here, what's going on here is that the line is settled at 6.7 kilonewton roughly, and they drop a weight on it and see how the impact force, and you see the force here on the side versus the settled tension was 3 kilonewton and it was at 6.something% of stretch. And if you drop something on, so you drop a weight like on a leash, then the tension goes much higher than what the stretch shows. So this means that the impact force is much higher than the slow pull force for the same amount of stretch. Here is another case where they started from a higher tension, around 6 kilonewton, and the forces went also super high compared to the slow pull stretch curve. This makes that all the impacts have higher forces. So so the simulator doesn't take that into account at the moment. Hopefully I can make a nicer version in the future, but that will be a lot of work, and also we just don't have the data to know how every webbing behaves under impact forces. So I think that's it for my presentation. Are there any questions? Was it clear?
Red had a question. If you know float solvers backup simulator, backup fall, heated backup falls.
No, I don't. I didn't see it. No.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh yeah. The test setup. Yeah, not the simulator.
No, the test seated.
Okay. Yeah, I've seen that Flo did some tests, but it was also there was not only the it was also the impact from like just the speed of the web lock.
Mm-hmm.
There was not only the backup fault, but yeah, it's also interesting.
And I've commented in a thread that
oh yes, Sarah made a good comment.
Did backup falls
in the chat is that
or other
lots
tests?
of the tests that were done with dynos that were with like 30 hertz, which is too slow to measure the actual peak force. So this is also a thing to take into account when I will try to enter all the former data into the simulator to see what the simulator gives.